The new girl stood at the front of the classroom with her books pressed tightly against her chest, trying to ignore the whispers crawling across the room like insects. She wore a simple dress, neatly pressed, the kind that spoke of care and respect rather than wealth. The teacher's eyes lingered on her a moment too long, lips curling with a thin smile that held no warmth. From the first roll call, his tone dripped with mockery, mispronouncing her name again and again while the class snickered. She corrected him softly, politely, but that only seemed to irritate him more, as if her calm confidence was an insult he couldn't tolerate. As the lesson dragged on, the teacher found excuses to single her out. Every wrong answer was exaggerated, every right one dismissed as luck. When she stood to read from the textbook, he interrupted her, criticizing her accent, her posture, even the way she dressed, claiming it violated some imaginary rule. The room grew tense, students shifting uncomfortably as his words sharpened. Then, in a sudden burst of anger that stunned everyone, he grabbed at the fabric of her dress, tearing it slightly at the seam to prove a point about discipline. Gasps filled the room as the girl froze, shock flashing across her face before she pulled the torn fabric closed with trembling hands. Silence swallowed the classroom. The teacher stood there breathing hard, as if expecting applause instead of horror. The girl didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply looked at him, eyes steady but filled with a quiet pain that made even the boldest bullies look away. At that exact moment, the classroom door creaked open, cutting through the tension like a blade. Heavy footsteps echoed against the floor, slow and deliberate, carrying an authority that demanded attention without a single word spoken. The man who entered was dressed simply in a dark suit, his expression unreadable, his presence commanding. He scanned the room once, taking in the torn dress, the stunned students, and the teacher still standing too close to his daughter. When his eyes met the girl's, something softened for a brief second, then hardened into steel as he turned back to the teacher. In a calm, controlled voice, he asked what had happened. The teacher's face drained of color as recognition struck. He knew that face from courtrooms and news headlines. This was not just a parent. This was a federal judge. Words failed the teacher. His mouth opened, then closed again, sweat forming on his forehead. The judge stepped forward, placing his jacket gently around his daughter's shoulders before facing the man who had humiliated her. He spoke quietly, but every word landed like a gavel strike, explaining the laws surrounding assault, discrimination, and abuse of authority. The class watched, wide-eyed, as power shifted in an instant. The man who had ruled the room with fear now looked small, trapped by his own actions. By the end of the day, administrators filled the hallway, statements were taken, and the teacher was escorted out, his career unraveling before his eyes. The girl returned to her seat, head held high, surrounded by a silence that now carried respect instead of ridicule. She hadn't needed to raise her voice or fight back. Justice had walked in through the door, and everyone in that room learned a lesson far more important than anything written on the board.